Great, it worked.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly cherry blossoms, but it's still lovely. Japan is lovely all the time, don't you think? So, minasan, konban, good to see you all. Thank you for joining me and the rest of the group for a little exploration into one of my favorite categories of sake. Before we begin, I'll just introduce myself, although I know some of you. My name is Chris Griese. I am a sales manager for a teeny tiny Japanese import company. We are based in Seattle, and we cover the whole United States. Toshi Kojima-san and I are the entire company. So there's just two of us. And I cover everything east of the Mississippi, or theoretically, that was the plan. So I go from here to New York to Florida to Texas, but recently added Colorado and Illinois and back up. So I have the eastern half of the US, Toshi-san has the West. Our company is 14 years old, and we were formed when Toshi decided to stop importing cheap Chinese blue jeans and start importing beautiful heirloom, artisanal, family-made Japanese sake, which is what he should have been doing all along. So for a long time, I was actually his customer, and Toshi was my favorite friend in the business. And about that time, I met Ben-san back in the day with Japan American Society of Minnesota. So I've been associated with your organization now for about 14 years. So the whole duration of my sake exploration, I've been walking down that road side by side with you guys. So that's my background. I live in Stillwater, Minnesota. And I'm just really happy to be able to do this for you tonight. These are some of my favorite people. And Rio, thank you for picking such a really cool category to be tasting. So I can't see you raising your hand, but you could raise your sake cup. I think it's appropriate that we all begin with a kanpai. So to all of you, kanpai minasan. Hi. We'll do this periodically because, you know, it is Friday night and you all joined us for this. And by the way, thank you so much. Those of you who went to Surdyk's or had sake delivered to you so that you're drinking the 3 sakes, I really appreciate that. Things are hard in Japan too. I mean, COVID-19 is having a serious impact on all agriculture, all brewing. People are trying to work together. We just barely finished the brewing season when it hit. So I was in Japan with Toshi the first couple of weeks of January, and I feel like I was just so lucky because all of our plans would have fallen apart if we had decided to travel the end of January or early February, which is what we usually do. So I've just visited everybody. Everyone was healthy and happy. And so far, everyone is still healthy, although not very happy. So how about we start? By the way, this photo is taken from the train crossing over from Okayama over to Shikoku. And we were on our way to see Baba-san at Housui in Tokushima. So it was in the morning. And if you look really carefully at the sunrise, what do you see? It looks like gates or something. And I have no idea what it is or where it came from. And my daughter saw this and she said, "Dad, those look like the gates to heaven." And it was like, oh my gosh, that's an amazing photo. So tonight doing this, I thought, oh, I'll start you with something special for the special one, because Tokubetsu, of course, means special. So enough of that. Everyone have sake? So Tokubetsu. Tokubetsu is a really kind of unusual sake. In the world of sake brewing, we have very distinct categories. So we have futsushu, which has very loose restrictions, can use any kind of rice, you can add alcohol, you can add flavor compounds, you can add sugars and amino acids, you can mess with it every kind of way. And in exchange for that, it's really cheap. The next step up in sake brewing, you get into the special designation sakes. So we go from standard grade sake, which is very inexpensive, into the more refined sakes. So those are called tokutai mei shoshu. And those sakes, there are really two families, without alcohol added or with alcohol added, regardless of whether or not you mill it a huge amount or not. So the first grade, when you step out of standard grade sake, when you start to get into the good stuff, is Junmai, if you do not add alcohol, and Hanjozo, if you do add alcohol. But for the most part, they're milled exactly the same. And it might be the same rice. And it might be in every way twins. It could be twin brothers or twin sisters, the only difference possibly being the addition of alcohol at the end of fermentation. So all of the Hanjozos are lighter, more delicate, and the perfume is more accentuated. All of the Junmais, regardless of milling, are denser, richer, a little heavier, a little more masculine, a little more muscular, regardless of whether it's a Junmai Ginjo, a Junmai Daiginjo. On the other side, it's Hanjozo, Ginjo, Daiginjo. No reference to Junmai. So where does most of us in the sake business, we're drinking Junmai, or we're drinking Junmai Ginjo, or we're drinking Junmai Daiginjo. We're not in this kind of crazy category called Tokubetsu. It's like there are none of the restrictions that apply to these other categories apply to Tokubetsu. Not quite sure how Tokubetsu came to be, but my theory is this. In the old days, the ability to mill the rice really finely really began to end somewhere around milling 30% away from the rice so that you had 70% remaining. Okay, that is the definition of Junmai. If you tried to mill beyond that, you just ended up crushing the rice. And the technology did not exist to successfully do that without breaking the rice. And in our world, in brewing world, if you break the rice, you're doomed. The rice will not ferment properly, the koji will not convert the starch to glucose properly, and the yeast will not eat it properly to convert it to alcohol. So that was sort of the end of the yellow brick road. You just couldn't go any farther. And if you did, wow, you were really good, and it was really special, and it was rare, and very little was made. But after the war, really in the 60s, the Japanese brewers discovered German wheat milling machines. And the Germans had invented these machines that were vertical mills, not horizontal. And they could mill wheat down to infinitesimally small without breaking the wheat germ. And the Japanese, of course, immediately thought, wow, what if we could do this with rice? So they imported some of these machines. And this was in the late 60s. And they started milling rice, and they were correct. You could mill the rice so small. It was just amazing. So that opened up this whole new world of sakes called Ginjo and Daiginjo. So before the 1970s, Ginjo and Daiginjo did not exist. So I think that might be surprising to you. It was really surprising to me that for all these thousands of years, the categories of sake were Futsushu, Junmai, and maybe a little bit of Tokubetsu. But Ginjo and Daiginjo did not exist. So Ginjos and Daiginjos have sort of taken over the world in Japan. And they created a whole new style, an opportunity to brew sake that was much more aromatic. So at the same time, just by chance, brewers started discovering, and the guilds, the brewing guilds in the various prefectures, really started researching new yeasts. And these yeasts that they started researching gave you more complete fermentations, and they gave you more aromas. They started finding yeast that gave you aromas like cherry blossoms. And instead of everything being like apples and maybe bananas and mushrooms, we started getting yeast that gave us aromas that gave us cantaloupe, honeydew melon, watermelon, wild strawberries, mango, tangerine, all kinds of exotic stuff. Then we discovered that yeast that grow inside of the flowers up in the mountains create esters that smell just like the flowers. So then we were very confused. We were like, oh my gosh, are we smelling the flower, or are we smelling the yeast that live in the flower? So that's where we're at today. We're in this really crazy new world where yeasts and rice can be milled, and we're using all kinds of interesting waters, and so that's it. So all of the energy in sake brewing left Junmai, left Futsushu, and kind of went into this Ginjo and Daiginjo world. But Tokubetsu has always been that little middle lineup. So let's talk about how brewers think about Tokubetsu, because I want you to think about Tokubetsu the way brewers think about Tokubetsu, and the way I think about Tokubetsu and Toshi. So our little joke is, oh, omakase, brewer, toji omakase is Tokubetsu. It's like the rules are off. There are no rules governing what defines Tokubetsu. So like in every other aspect of sake brewing, there's a rule that controls how much kasu, what's the alcohol level, what kind of yeast, did you use official sake rice, but not in Tokubetsu world. So Tokubetsu allows a brewer a lot of latitude to be creative. So if you were working every day at the brewery for years and years and years, and the brewery's business depended on futsushus and junmais and ginjos, wouldn't it be nice to have a small amount of sake that you could make that would be really special, that could be different, and it could be your take on things. So if you ask a brewer what's their favorite sake, they're not going to tell you Daiginjo. They're going to tell you Tokubetsu. Tokubetsu is my baby. Tokubetsu is my favorite. So they're sort of souped up junmais in a way. But the law states that to be a Tokubetsu junmai, it should have a semai-buai of 60%. So it's supposed to be milled to ginjo. But then there's this sort of release clause that mostly effectively says, whatever, like whatever you want to do, we don't care. So if you use a special yeast, if you use a special rice, and the rice is not necessarily a rice, it's not necessarily a sakemai rice strain. It could be just table rice, but it could be a really interesting old heirloom table rice. But whatever you want to do, or if you want to use a different kind of moto for creating umami and converting starch to sugar, you can do that. Or possibly you have a small spring where you don't get enough water to make the big volume production, but you save that spring water just for making Tokubetsu, or maybe for making Tokubetsu and Daiginjo. Or possibly you have a different recipe and you're using different temperature curves because different temperature curves during fermentation give you different aromas. All of these things just allow the brewer to sort of break the mold and not do the standard products. Also, a brewer might be really famous for a certain kind of sake. And so maybe they're famous for ginjo, and being a ginjo means alcohol was added. So maybe they want to back it down a notch and do something that technically could be ginjo, but it's entirely different in some respect. And so it's just kind of like a jazz musician doing a riff on a melody that you know well. Okay? So do you get the idea? Or did I just kill it for you? Okay, so let's move on. And I kind of covered some of these things right now. So in the left hand, you have Junmai grade. What defines Junmai? Okay, first of all, they're much older. They've been brewed for 1,000 years. They have much more subdued aromas. They are hearty and hefty. You know, I like to say they're the old grandpa sakes. They're like what your father or mother and your grandparents would have consumed 40, 30, 40, 75 years ago, because Daiginjo and Ginjo didn't exist, right? So their milling is, the requirement is 70% remaining or 30% removed, so semi-buai of 70%. Because you don't mill so much, there's a lot more protein that's out in the husk of the rice, and that gets included in the sake. And so if the protein is included, that equals more amino acids, because the koji enzymes break down the proteins back into their original amino acid form. And if you have more amino acids, the yeast and the koji, the amino acids floating around in there, end up in the sake. And amino acids, we call it umami. And it's glutamic acid. There's 21 or 22 different amino acids that kind of fall into this camp. They're really healthy. They're good for you. You're made out of them. But 3 or 4 of them, succinic acid, glutamic acid, those are flavor enhancing amino acids. So when you drink sake, when you're having that, how's that cheeseburger, by the way? He can't talk today. So I'm hoping that, you know, you're having a little cheese or a cheeseburger or a little snack. You know, it's umami. It's the amino acids that amplify those flavors and make them taste better. That's the magic of sake. So anyway, umami and amino acids are heavy though. So these are sakes that tend to be more weighty. To create them, we use a warmer fermentation, 12 to 18 degrees centigrade. From the warmest is, 18 degrees. After we've got the yeast started, we drop it from 30 degrees to 18. But mostly it's 12 to 18 C, and the fermentation is 21 to 28 days, so roughly 3 weeks. And we use more koji because the rice is not as highly milled. It's harder for the koji to get into the rice, so it takes more. So you have more umami, you have more koji, you have these more weighty, heavy things. But you use more of the rice, so it's more affordable. Junmais are less expensive than ginjos. Ginjos are less expensive than daiginjo. Tokubetsu, even though it's milled to ginjo most of the time, is usually less expensive than ginjo. So it's a bit of a value. But junmais are definitely more affordable. Junmais, they're very flexible with all those amino acids in there. Try it at any temperature: chilled, cellar temperature, room temperature, warm. I'm tasting all the sakes tonight at room temperature because I couldn't be bothered to chill it, and I actually get more flavor and texture and more of a full sense of the sake at room temperature. So on the other hand, ginjo, just everything is the opposite. It's a modern style, And the word Ginjo means big. And what are they talking about? They're talking about big presence, big aroma, big flavor. They're not talking about weight. They're talking about aromatics. So Ginjos are all about aromatics. And when you taste a Ginjo, you'll immediately know it's a Ginjo. You'll go, whoa, cantaloupe, honeydew melon, wildflowers. You never get that in Junmai. So, but there's more milling required. Now you have to mill away 40%, so 60% semi-buai. But in so doing, there's less protein because the protein's all out in the husk. So now less protein means fewer amino acids. Fewer amino acids means less umami. It's prettier, but it's lighter. And it doesn't have that as much of that magic food enhancing flavor component that that you absolutely love. By the way, we have kind of a Siamese cat, and she's decided she's going to talk to everybody. So it's not me. Okay, if she gets a little loud, I apologize. So less umami means lighter body. And then if it's truly Ginjo, not a Junmai Ginjo, you've added alcohol, which further dilutes it, lightens it, and amplifies the floral and fruity components. So take your pick. You want to hang out with your grandparents and have cheeseburgers? Or do you want to be modern, hip, and cool and have, really good nigiri and sashimi and, really delicate food? Or in fact, you just have these by themselves. So the difference, however, is in character, not in quality. I will always argue there is no difference in quality from Junmai to Tokubetsu Junmai to Junmai Ginjo to Junmai Dai Ginjo. Qualitatively, they're all made with the same love and attention, same wonderful rice, all the same kind of attention to detail. The difference is in the character and the expression of the sake. So do not let people tell you that Dai Ginjo is the best sake. It simply is not true. They're just showing their lack of experience, and they're not being very open-minded. We're going to taste sake in a moment. So Seimai Buai, this is what I'm talking about. That's a sake mill on the right. And you can see what happens to the rice as we mill it. So it comes in at 100%. It's a brown rice. That's a sakemai rice. That's probably Yamada Nishiki. I'm not sure that's Yamada Nishiki. That might be Goyaku Mangoku. It's a little fatter and rounder. But we are milling the rice down to get rid of the proteins, to get rid of the fats, to get rid of the things that are kind of bitter and create all that umami if we're trying to make ginjo. So somewhere around 70 to 60% remaining, we've removed enough of the proteins that they're really not a factor anymore in the flavor and the texture of the sake. And now we're going for the ballerinas. We're going for the really delicate, pretty style sakes. So everything up to about 70%, got a little muscle on the bone. It's more masculine and more old school. And once you get to 60% Seimai Buai, they're definitely heading in the modern direction. They're lighter. So I keep repeating these things, but I just want you to be aware of like the main components in sake that affect the outcome of what you're buying. So in the top left corner is an ampule of a yeast from the brewing guild, and all of the brewing guilds maintain their own local yeasts, and then there's some national companies that provide them for the breweries, and they might have a range of 10 or 15 different yeasts that a brewer can select from. The lower the number, if you ever happen to see it, the longer ago it was discovered. Yeast number 6 was discovered in about 1912 in Hiroshima by Saito-san's father. Today we're up in the 20s. So once you get up into the double digits, they're definitely modern style yeasts. By the time you get to 18 and 19, AK 21, Akita 21, they're like super fruity, super high tone. If there's 6 or 7, 8 is extinct, 9 or 10, they're more earthy, more subdued, they're quieter. And to my mind, I mean, that's where I like to hang out. But I'm getting old, my hair's turning gray. So, but if you were younger, you would totally disagree with me. Local rices are often used for tokubetsu. There's probably not much produced. Like, I mean, you start talking about omachi, and if you start talking about goriki rice and tamazakai, and some of these really old, and wataribune, Ben probably remembers wataribune, they're really tall and spindly and hard to grow, and the farmers hated them. And the brewers, you know, made incredible sake, but you know, the crop was so inconsistent that in the 60s, they began to hybridize new rice strains that were short and stout and tough and got ripe sooner, like September, early September, instead of mid-October, and therefore avoiding a lot of the monsoon season and a lot of crop damage. But there is now a movement afoot for the last 15 or 20 years to revive these heirloom rices. So the next time you see me down at Certix, I'll probably be down there, you know, bending your ear about how important it is to have genetic diversity. And heirloom rices represent, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years of rices that otherwise would be extinct, were it not for some of these really inspired brewers. Bottom left-hand corner is part of the process of brewing sake. It's like, how much do you mill it? So how much do you soak it? Look at that photo. That man is watching the rice go from transparent, translucent to opaque. And what you don't see is his mother is right behind him with a stopwatch. And she's timing how long it's taking it to soak in to get to the shinpaku in the center. And once they do that, they know, and they can start brewing the rest of the day. They'll be at that water temperature for that milling grade. It's going to take 21.5 minutes to get what they want. The man in the bottom center is making the sake that you're going to taste second. It's a Yamahai, and you can see he's in this little insulated room. And that's to keep the lactic bacteria from escaping into the rest of the brewery. So we come and go out of that room, we change our jackets, we change our hats, we change our slippers, we wash our hands twice so that we don't infect the rest of the brewery with lactic bacteria and make everything become Yamahai or Kimoto. But that's the Yamahai that you'll have later. And koji up in the top right corner, and kojimai underneath it. In my hand, you can see the effect the koji mold spores have on the steamed rice. Sort of looks like yogurt. It's now creating a lot of glucose as well as amino acids. And then the temperature in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see temperature of water. No, what is that? It's 33 C. Oh, wow. That's really high. Oh, I know where that was. That was in the koji mura. So when you bring in steamed rice and you inoculate it with the koji, it's got to be 33 to 36 C or you kill the mold spores. Okay, it's time to taste. I think I don't know what else to tell you other than it's really yummy, delicious. Oishii desu. It's great. You're going to really enjoy it. So if you have the sake, please take a sip. We're going to start with Ishioka Brewing Company and their tokubetsu. They actually make 2 tokubetsus from 2 different rices. But go ahead and grab it, and I will too. It's called Dancing Crane. And you know what's really cool, you guys, is while I'm talking to you, we live on a marsh, on a wetland, and 2 5-foot-tall sandhill cranes have moved into our marsh about 50 yards away. And so we have our own cranes now that I can look at while I drink this absolutely beautiful dancing crane. and they've been jumping around and flapping around and mating, and it's just amazing. So this is the sake. Let me introduce you to the people at the brewery, if I may. Of course, I could turn around so you can see the label. But some of you already know because you have the bottle. The young man giving you the peace sign is the son of one of the president, and he is studying sake brewing and has come back and is in the process of becoming the toji for the next generation. The young woman is the daughter of the other partner, and she is actually going to become like executive director. But on that given day, she was wearing a brewing hat because they were brewing sake and it was all hands on deck. Everybody get to work. There's like so much work to do and we don't have enough people. Down below are the two wives. They're not married, but they are, you know, their husbands run the place, or were, and now they're also deeply involved in running the brewery. So we actually met with them that day and had an hour-long conversation about how difficult it is to establish a market in the United States. So that just put another 40 pounds of guilt in my backpack and made me make all kinds of promises that I would try even harder to get them going. The man I work with on the bottom left is Toshi. That's Toshi Kojima. And he is drinking about the other Tokubetsu Junmai called Mighty Peak. And Melissa Surtick, if you're there, you might be listening. Melissa carries both of their Tokubetsu Junmais, Dancing Crane and Mighty Peak. And Toshi was just savoring this, going, what an amazing sake. So, and then below that, we're looking at 3 or 4 other sakes from them, and we're definitely going to be bringing in more. Let's see. So did you all see this? I think it was kind of last minute. I apologize. But if you want to, I think it was emailed to you. So there's one for each of the 3 sakes. It's just data. It's a kind of tech sheet. So Dancing Crane, Ishoka Brewery from Ibaraki Ken. Seimai Buai is 55. So Seimai Buai 55, that's getting pretty close to Daiginjo. That's halfway through Ginjo. It's halfway on the way to Daiginjo. So very refined milling. The rice is a local rice, but it grows pretty widely in Japan now. It's getting more popular, called Miyama-nishiki. And it is definitely related to Yamada-nishiki. The sake meter value is a number that expresses the specific gravity of the sake, which is really our brewing way of measuring sugar. So dry sake, to your taste, would be +2, +1 or +2, not 0. And beginning to taste a little sweet to you would be about -2 or 3. So sake can go as high as +18 or so, and that's bone dry. And it can go as sweet as -80, although when we're brewing, we'll achieve sugar levels of -200 until the yeast gets to work and eats up all the sugar. So it's lightly dry. This is on the dry side, but not terribly dry. Alcohol is 15%. That's really average for a well-made sake. Inexpensive sakes are usually diluted down to 13 or 14%, so they can get more sake for their money, and you get more water for your money. Sorry. Their water source is very soft. They have really beautiful soft water, and it comes from a very deep well on the property, and they think the water comes down from the mountains up behind them. Their moto, there's different brewing methods, is called sokujo. That's one of those 21 or 25-day brewing techniques. but you add the lactic bacteria, or you add the syrup. You don't grow the bacteria. So it's a more modern style. So give it a taste. How are we thinking? What are we thinking of the sake? Mm. So for me, mine has the appearance of nigori because I forgot I had nigori in my cup. So I think you're probably seeing it's pretty clear. Is it not? Mm. Hi, so desu. So this sake, not only is this sake pressed through a yabuta, where they squeeze the sake out of the rice and leave the rice solids behind, called kasu, which we will put on our faces for makeup and eat it and make pickles and soup stock and all kinds of yummy, delicious things. And then this sake was also filtered. So we ran it through an activated charcoal filter that pulls any of the haze, any of the leftover protein haze out. So it will stay fresh for a couple of years. It will stay really clear, it won't discolor. And it's something that most brewers do for most of their sakes. Okay? So that's clarity, intensity. You can look at these things. I don't know that you want me to talk about every single thing, but if you do, let me know. I mean, this is, this chart that I've given you comes from the Wine Educators Spirits Education Trust in London. And so WSET is one of the leading education schools in the world for wine, spirits, and more recently sake. So I was involved with them early on because there was nobody in the United States that really kind of had gone down the road very far. So there's a small group of us who are trying to, you know, elevate the conversation. So this is a little overkill. It's more for sommelier kind of situation, but I thought some of you might be very technologically oriented and would like the rigorous application of your taste buds and your sense of smell. Okay? But we can look at some big things like, how is the nose? The nose is the aroma. Do you like it? Is it interesting? Does it smell like anything you've smelled before? Is it overtly fruity? Do you get cantaloupe, honeydew melon? Do you get mushroom? Do you get apple crate? You know, what sort of aroma comes to mind? It's very quiet though, don't you think? I think it's a light intensity aroma. And I can only say that because I've smelled and tasted many sakes that are very intense. So then you know this one's very light. I would not say it's very ginjo-ka. It doesn't have a lot of that melon kind of character. It's a little more in the cereal grainy in my book, but it could be different for you. I even get a little bit of lactic character. I get a little bit of kind of yogurt. And maybe you don't like that term, but I love it. And we're gonna get a lot more of it in the next sake. So I hope you kind of like that sourdough bread character. Although this is not a Yamahai. So this is a really consistent, so I just tasted a bottle of this last week that was 2.5 years old, okay? This bottle that you've got in front of you right now was bottled 9 months ago, okay? So it's like perfect in its prime. But the one that was 2.5 years old tastes just like this. I'm so shocked, I can't believe it. I really expected the one I tasted that had been bottled 2.5 years ago would be showing signs of age, but it's not. So that's a really good sign. And I'm actually going to let the brewery know that, because they probably don't have a library of old sake. That's more of a winery kind of thing. So it's a sidebar, but you know, a lot of your sake will age longer than you think. I met a person in Dallas who would not buy sake that was over 6 months old. And I'm like, you're crazy. Sake evolves like wine. That's terrible. You'll never know the beauty of some of these sakes if you don't give them a year or two. But keep them in the dark and keep them cool, just like you would wine, and they'll age beautifully. Okay? Sidebar. Sweetness on the palate, acidity, umami. I mean, a lot of this has to do with your own palate. The more you taste, the more sensitive you'll become to the sweetness, to the acidity. Our cat particularly likes this sake. She's giving it a big vote of confidence in the background. I don't know if you can hear her. I hope not. I think this has got pretty good acidity too, don't you? Do you feel the little warming edginess on the sides of your tongue and under your tongue? That's acidity at work in combination with the alcohol. But there's a little edge to it. It's not sharp like wine. And sake has much lower acid levels than wine, like 1/20th. That's why I said before, old guys like me, if we drink a bunch of Sauvignon Blanc, we'll be up all night with really bad indigestion, but we can drink sake with impunity. So, again, you should expect alcohol ranges from 14 to 17.5, unless you are specifically buying barrel strength, undiluted Genshu. And I don't drink a lot of Genshu because I can't drink a lot of Genshu. And because I like to drink sake, I tend to stick in the world of 15 to 16% alcohol, 17 maybe max. And I definitely stay away from the 19, 20, and 21% alcohol sakes. Those are for people much younger than I. We call those sailor boy sakes. Hi, Rio.
It's 10 to 7.
Oh, we gotta hurry up. Yeah. Next sake. I think we can move on. I think you have a good idea about this sake. Okay. This next sake is made by Baba-san. Baba-san is in Tokushima, and his family has been brewing there so long that he can't even figure it out. They're like, they've lost track of how long they've been there. Baba-san is the most outspoken Japanese man I've ever met. And so are his sakes. I tell you that sake is kind of like dogs and their owners. The sakes somehow match either the principal or the toji. There's always a relationship. They can be graceful, or they can be stern, or they can be assertive. In this case, they're both elegant and assertive. Baba-san likes to dress well, and he really likes great noodles. His water, you think it's that river in the top left corner, but actually they go get the water 5 miles down the river from a 300-foot deep well that runs under a river. There's a river that runs under that river, a subterranean river, and they get that water down there and they bring it back to the brewery. You can see the brewery in the bottom right corner. It is kind of a collection of one edition needed, and then another edition needed, and another edition needed. And I love, love, love this place. Everything is made out of galvanized metal. It's all got that aging, gorgeous patina of weather on it. And in the bottom left corner, we are making the sake that you are now drinking. It is called Old Mountain Yamahai Tokubetsu Junmai. It comes in 2 sizes. This is the regular size, and you all bought the 1 cups. So let's taste. Is everybody tasting? Hi? The key to understanding this sake is just to know that this moto starter, the moto type, is called Yamahai. And what we do is when we've got all the ingredients added, freshly steamed rice and the yeast starter, well, actually, I take it back. We have a small amount of freshly steamed rice and a little bit of koji that will begin to break down the rice, and we leave it open out on a rooftop. And we intentionally allow lactic bacteria to fall in this little tank. And then we warm it up and we say, grow, lactic bacteria grow. And we cause an enormous population explosion of lactic bacteria. It acidifies the little starter tank. We have billions of cells of lactic bacteria having a party. They kill any other germs because their acidity levels get so high. So it is the earliest form of pasteurization. It also acidifies the mother starter and leaves it in a very pure condition so that when we add the yeast, there is no competition, because yeast can tolerate acidity. It cannot tolerate a lot of other bacteria. So you end up with this lactic acid note. Even though we dilute it and dilute it, it's still an element in the sake. So this is why I tell everyone, this is sort of like a sourdough bread sake. And some days it's very sour, and some years it's more sour than others. So I can tell you, having come back from Baba-san in January, he was like, you know, my Yamahais are not as Yamahai as they used to be. What do you think about that? And I was like, well, I'm kind of hardcore. I really like him hardcore. He said, yeah, but most people don't, you know, and I'm getting a lot of pressure to make more daiginjo. I was like, Baba-san, don't make daiginjo. There's plenty of it out there. Make Yamahai. He said, yeah, but it's a real pain. It takes a month just to get the moto started, okay? I was like, you know what? So now I put another 40 pounds of guilt in my backpack. I was like, okay, Baba-san, I'm working on Ishioka. Now I'm gonna work on your Yamahai. I will sell Yamahai everywhere I go. I'm beginning to feel like Johnny Appleseed. So I hope you like this sake. It is amazing with cheese. It's really good at different temperatures. I don't know what temperature you're drinking it at, but I'm having it at room temperature, and it's rich and it's flavorful. And the acid is a little bit hidden because it's warmer. But if you chill the sake, the acid steps forward because the sugar drops back. And we'll talk about that another time when we do like a food magic umami and that kind of a class. But okay, in no way, shape, or form do you get cantaloupe, honeydew melon, or wildflowers or strawberries. Or cherry blossoms. I mean, you really do get the acid, do you not? If you don't swallow right away, if you just let the sake surround the back of your tongue, you'll feel the acidic prickle. When we drink wine, we pick wines that have high acidity to go with fish and to cut through rich dishes and gravies and sauces. And this sake does all of that, but this sake also loves like grilled, smoky, charred things. So again, I have my own palate, and it's like the older I get, the more backwards I go. And I hope that happens to you too, because there's a lot of reward in these rich old styles of sake. That's why I like Tokubetsu. Okay, how's our time?
6:56.
Okay. we might go over by a couple minutes, but not long, I promise. So is Old Mountain Yamahai Tokubetsu Junmai a mouthful to say? It is, but you'll impress your friends and family if you practice. It's a great little sake. I hope you'll make it one of your regulars. This will teach you teach your palate that, like, sometimes what came before was really better than what's happening right now. So, all right, we'll move on to the third sake, the last sake. So, in sake world, I don't need to tell you that for centuries, women were not running businesses, maybe unless all the males in the family died. But things have changed, which is really wonderful. And it's so exciting for me, for us importers, and for people who are fans of sake to see so many women coming into the brewing world. It's just awesome. And their approach to the social network that is required to brew sake is different than guys. And people that I talk to who work for women tojis are like, I love it. Things are smooth and organized, and we have a great time together, and we're making killer good sake. And this is, so meet Hiroko Yokozawa. The brewery is Tsukinowa, and they're in Iwate, and they're sort of in the northern western part of the prefecture. She has now been brewing at home for 14 years. So she is raising a family, she's married, she has a beautiful 7-year-old daughter. She started a mochi ice cream parlor last year, which is like insane, her mochi ice cream. And she works with a lot of mochi rice, and she was actually making mochi sake, which is really insane because it's so sticky and so soft and hard to work with. You are drinking her Junmai Tokubetsu called Moonring. And I've given you images on the bottom because if you see it on the shelf, it'll be in the black wrapper, the paper wrapper. And if you unwrap it, this is what the label looks like. Her brewing guild has been really central in helping her learn the skills. She was actually in the fashion business in Tokyo for years. Her father was running the brewery. She has a sister who is completely not interested in being involved in running a sake brewery. And one night she was sitting in a bar in Tokyo, and the bartender was like, Hiroko, it's so good to see you again. Can we pour you a sake? I want to pour you one of my favorite sakes since you always buy the cheap stuff. And she said, okay. And he turned around and he put a bottle of her father's Ginjo in front of her and said, I want you to try this. It's my favorite sake. So after breaking down into tears, she called home and said, Dad, I want to come home. I want to learn how to brew. And that was 15 years ago. And she is now winning awards all over the world. And so we are super proud to represent this woman. And the last time I saw her, she's like, quit selling my sake because I'm a woman and sell my sake because I'm a damn good sake maker. So another 40 pounds of guilt in my backpack. That's now 120 pounds of guilt, which I happily carry for these families and these hardworking people. You see a rice paddy next to her. That's one of the family rice paddies. They also work with all the local farmers. They're really into organic rice. She runs the show. And this winter, Blake Richardson, who owns Motoi in Uptown Minneapolis, the little sake brew pub, I arranged for him to go work with Hiroko, and he did an internship for 10 days brewing with Hiroko. And they had a gas, and every day they'd work all day brewing sake, and then every night they would go out and eat and drink and have fun. So there's a deep connection between breweries around the world, and we have one right here in Minnesota. So let's talk about this sake really quickly, and then I'll let you go, or you can ask some questions. Seimai Buai is 55. Seimai Buai is the same Seimai Buai as Dancing Crane, getting close to Daiginjo. Gin no Tome is the local rice. It is not an authorized rice. So, although she's obviously milled it almost up to Daiginjo. So think of this. She's milled away 45% of the rice, and she's still calling it a Junmai Tokubetsu instead of a Ginjo. Sake meter value is +4, so a little rounder, you know. As that number drops, the sake palate feel gets rounder. Look at her alcohol level though, 16.5. Hiroko likes strong sake. She does, and so do I. I mean, this is really beautiful intensity sake. Her water is very soft, comes from mountain springs that are right behind the brewery, very shallow. They have several of them. And she uses Sokujo method moto. Her father is still involved, the general. He's always still trying to get me inebriated every time I see him. She works with a local guild member. The guild that she works with, the Sake Brewing Guild, is called Nanbu Guild. They are over 1,000 years old of continuous sake education, 1,000 years. So those are her coaches. So when you taste the sake, it is truly a marriage between modernity, the future is right now, and a 1,000-year-old past. So most breweries make many different junmais, many different ginjos, a lot of daiginjos, a bunch of futsushus under different labels, but they usually only make one tokubetsu. So I want you to appreciate these for what they are. And so I have all these funny little things I like to say, but I do like to say Tokubetsu is the best of both worlds. It's, you know, marries old traditions with modern process and modern aesthetics. And I should have said modern aesthetics. And it's unpredictable and it's exciting. And yes, it's like a good marriage. It's also like a box of Cracker Jacks. Why do you buy Cracker Jacks? You buy Cracker Jacks because there's a surprise inside. You never know what the present's going to be. Tokubetsu is like that. You really don't know if it's going to fall in the Junmai world, if it's going to fall in the Ginjo world. You really can't tell. It's also exquisitely temperature sensitive. So play with it at different temperatures, and it'll be like having 3 different sakes. And it's also very small production. So those are just some of the things that I kind of love about Tokubetsu, and I hope I've opened a little door for you tonight. Rio-san,
Hi.
have you collected any astute questions from our...
Yes. So let me change it up a little bit because of the time. I'm going to make a couple announcements, and then after that, I will just keep it open to everybody, and I'll just have people ask you a question. Is that okay, Chris?
Sure. I'm just going to go to a different format here.
So yeah, if you can just kind of unshare your screen, but can you hear me better right now?
Right.
Better? Yes?
Uh-huh.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much, Chris. It was wonderful, and it's always wonderful.
Sake's always wonderful.
So once you can unshare the screen, maybe we can...
would you like me to do that? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, there we go.
What am I gonna do is, well, if you can change your screen to a gallery view, then you can see everybody. Yes. Have you seen sign language people?
Ready? Hi, Melissa.
For applause.
I knew you were there.
Yeah.
Who do I know?
Chris, applause. Thank you very much, Chris.
Kawakami-san. Hi.
Yeah, everybody's here. Hi. Chris, you're one of my favorite people. I respect you so much that I'm actually wearing pants today just for you, even though this is a Zoom event. And also, I would like to say hello to Melissa from Certix.
Yes.
Are you here, Melissa?
Right in the middle.
Oh, hey, do you want to unmute yourself and then say hello?
Unmute it. Hi.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi.
This is such a fun event. It's our first Zoom tasting. I'm here with my husband, and it's a great time.
Great.
The first time I really got interested with sake was first I visited Japan and fell in love with the culture, and then I came home and talked with Chris so much about sake, and just fell in love with how interesting and unique and magical the beverage is. And ever since then we've expanded our selection at Certix, and we now have a 8-foot cooler of all chilled sake and many of Chris's very, very gem sakes. And when I say gem, they are very special. So many of these that you tried today and many more. So you come check it out, or many of you have already visited our website to place orders. You can view it there as well, and we really appreciate the support, and this event's been very fun. Thank you.
Great. Melissa, thank you for all your help in putting this together, making it easy for people to get the sakes.
Yes, it's been very good. Thank you.
Definitely.
Yeah, we'll do it again.
Thank you very much for keeping your store open in this difficult time and have all the awesome sake for us. So thank you very much.
Yeah, we appreciate the support.
Thank Melissa.
Cheers. Kanpai.
Kanpai. Yay. So now we have all of you. Let's do a kanpai photo together. So if you can turn on your camera for a second so that I can have you do this. Ready? Raise your cup or mug or stein or bottle or whatever you drink out of.
Kanpai.
Hi, kanpai.
Kanpai.
Yay. Thank you, thank you. Oh.
So are there any questions?
Can I, sorry.
Sorry.
So before we go to the question, again, thank you very much to all of you for joining us today. We would like to keep, give you an event like this. So what we're planning in the future is we're gonna have a director of Asia section of MIA, the art museum. He is going to give us a talk about their collection. So that will be super awesome. And also we are planning to have a hula dance lesson. I just learned the word hula is a dance, that means dance. So if you say hula dance, apparently we're saying dance. I just learned that like last week. So, and we have a Japanese hula instructor that who's gonna teach us dance. So we all gonna dance together. If you're embarrassed about it, have a couple shots of sake before. That helps a lot. I know this, I have done this. So if you can join us in the future also. And again, if you can donate and support us, we can keep doing this during this rather interesting time. Pants option time, that's what I call it. But thank you very much for being with us. So now, what I would like to do is just open the floor for you, so you can literally raise your hand, or you can do one of these. Do you see that?
That's fine.
And I will just kind of call on your name, and unmute yourself, and you can ask question. And if you have to go, please feel free. Thank you very much. And now let's open to the question. But I have a couple that I have received. So can I share this right now? Okay, so you talked about the temperature.
Right.
So there was a question that says, what makes the yeast extinct? What
why does the yeast go extinct?
Are there ways to maintain yeast, like seed banks?
Right.
Original seed.
So what happens is it can die of neglect. It can die out because people decide it's not effective. It doesn't give you a complete fermentation. It's not strong enough to compete against as a yeast on its own. It can't compete against other ambient yeast to get in there and ruin your fermentation. And so your sake goes from tasting really lovely to really nasty because your yeast pooped out. Other things that happen is that the process of selecting the yeast colonies, the cells, is really specialized. And the government and these brewing guilds manage that. And they have scientists who separate out the cells and go, this is a perfect clone. And we will propagate yeast number 7 from this cell. And they will then universally be able to deliver a constant yeast to all the brewers. But yeast are really funny that way, and they mutate. I mean, I hate to make a reference to something nasty that's going on, but we're all reading about, how things mutate right now, and yeast do it a lot. So it can just mutate out of existence, and you can't find a good example of what it was. And actually, everybody thinks that yeast number 7 doesn't smell or taste anything like it used to, like 50 years ago. So who asked that question? That is a great question.
Luis.
You get gold stars for that question.
Yeah, and then 2 more shots. How about that?
Have some more sake.
Yeah, and do you have any cheese recommendation?
Oh, yes. I mean, I consume most of my cheese with sake. And so I tend to like the things, not necessarily really hard cheeses. Like I love Parmesan, but I want something that when I'm drinking sake, it helps dissolve the cheese on my palate and it amplifies the cream flavor of the original milk. So I know this is going to sound like I have poor taste, so I apologize for that. But things like brick and fresh mozzarella and Monterey Jack, and not like a 3-year-old cheddar, but like a 1-year-old cheddar are wonderful. That said, I represented a chicken brewery in Okayama, and when the owner got off the airplane a few years ago, he was like, take me to Certix right away. I have to go to the cheese shop. I need good blue cheese. He said, my Junmai and like Roquefort is to die for. Those are my words, but that's what he meant. So he wanted to make sure his sake was tasted with a really rich, salty, moist cheese. Okay, does that help?
Yeah. Food-related question. Marty asks, what is the proper order when eating with sake?
Hi. Are you asking me how many different sakes with the meal or how many courses with, like, are you going to have several sakes through the course of the meal?
Marty, do you want to unmute yourself and...
Yeah, so I was thinking of how when you're testing sake like we did tonight, what would be the proper method to the madness per se?
It's a great question too. I always think about that. So sometimes I say to people, I'm going to throw you in the deep end of the pool right away. And so we're going to start with Junmai or Futsu, something really full and hearty. And I'm going to wake up your palate. And then we'll finish the evening on a daiginjo, something really delicate We're done eating. We've slowed down. We have slaked our thirst. And now we're not just drinking to consume great alcohol, but we're sipping. So that's one theory, okay? Daiginjo, not with dessert, just it is dessert. The other theory is have a little daiginjo or a ginjo before the meal, just because they're so beautiful and your palate will be really, really sensitive. And then go ahead and have dinner and work your way backwards, but end the meal with a really full-bodied sake, a junmai, with something grilled or smoked or the big meat, or if you're into that. Or if you're not into animal protein, then, you know, like sauteed mushrooms or a curry, something like that. That's how I think about it, but I'm not consistent. And I don't think there's a consistent answer.
I was just looking for an idea because I know it's definitely up to the user and the tester.
I hope that works for you.
Thank you.
So, arigato.
Hi. The rice and grain questions.
Hi.
With an abundance of inventory, how long can the next rice crop be stored before being made into sake?
Well, I think the rice can be stored not indefinitely, but for several years. The problem is storage capacity.
Specifically for sake, though?
Where are you going to put it? I mean, everybody's system is built to move a certain volume of rice through the system. And sake rice, in particular, is not good table rice. So you can't take that rice to the general market and sell it for eating rice, because the shinpaku is such a little pearl that when you cook it, it doesn't puff like table rice does, where the starch is uniformly distributed throughout the rice grain. So not very good for eating. What are you going to do? I mean, there's only a certain amount of excess capacity that every business will build into what they're doing. So, you know, that's a really tough question. It's a huge financial impact. I mean, if the brewers, well, first of all, this year was preempted. The brewing season was truncated and ended almost a month early. So most of the brewers got done with all their important sakes. Daiginjos were made. They were probably doubling back on futsus by the time the season ended, not that critical, but a lot of volume in that. And so what are the farmers going to do next year? How much rice are they going to plant? And what will the inventory be that did not sell through? I'm not close enough to the ground on that. I mean, I know what it's not different than Minnesota, like our situation with pigs. I hate to relate pigs and rice, but it's a commodity. It's an an agricultural product. The answer is the rice will stay fresh for at least a year, more, probably 2 years, in proper ventilation, dry. It's got to be stored like wheat. It's got to be really dry.
Cool. Thank you. Another question regarding the grain from Kelly. Why are yeast strains numbered and not named?
Why are what numbered? Yeasts numbered and not named?
Yeast strains numbered and not named.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm sure at some point, I mean, this is all very scientific, right? So the people that research rice or yeasts, the biologists, are more prone to numbering things so that you can more easily identify subspecies, subclones of something. We may know this as yeast number 7, but they probably know it as something more like yeast 7 point, something else, which tells them it came from this particular strain. I think numbers are just easier to keep track of than names. It's probably that. And that's kind of a wild shot. And I will follow up on that. And Rio, I'll send you a good answer and you can publish it in the next newsletter, okay?
Yeah, I will do that for the newsletter.
I mean, I know when I can go no further.
Is there anybody who wants to ask a question? Do you want to raise hand? I'm trying to see. Bob-san, dozo.
So I do have a question, but I also have a potential theory about the numbers.
Thank you.
In Japan, typhoons have numbers too, whereas hurricanes have names. So maybe there's a meteorological tie-in.
All right. You know, I could call Toshi right now and get
Wake him up. Wake him up.
Okay, so my question is, I already actually had a half-finished bottle of sake in my refrigerator, and now thanks to you, I'm sorry I didn't get the Yamahai, but I got 2 of the sake. So now I have 3 half-finished bottles of sake.
Oh, I'm so happy for you.
I can't have friends over, so my question is, how long can I keep sake in my refrigerator once it's open?
3 or 4 months.
Really?
Hi. Isn't that great news?
It's nothing like wine.
It is the best news ever. Of all the things that you've learned tonight, this is perhaps the most important. Because of how we brew sake, because of all the exposure to oxygen all the way along, because of the interaction of koji, the higher alcohols, because we do this sandan shikomi, additions and additions and additions, and when we're done fermenting, we're all the way up to 20% alcohol. We proof it back to 15. The sake has already, the Moroni has already been exposed to lots of oxygen. The high alcohol helps to preserve it. And it's a grain, not a grape. It is already antioxidative, okay? So a lot of the elements that are really highly oxidative in grapes, which is where we all learn how to protect our alcoholic beverages, those elements do not exist in sake. So there. So you can come back and finish those up for Labor Day, and they'll be fine. Okay.
Well, I promised Melissa that I'll drink them well before then.
But Melissa is really horrified that I just said that. Hey, everybody, come by again. And that's for the national economy of Japan.
If it takes you 3 months, Bob-san, we need to talk.
Right.
It doesn't.
If it does, looks like I will come to your house and personally coach you. And I'll bring you larger ochokos.
Right.
We'll all go to his house and help him drink it.
Yep.
That's a deal. Melissa, I noticed you have a kind of a nice deck, and we have a nice deck too. So once we end all this social distancing craziness, I'll be happy to host a sake party on our deck. We're right across the river from Surdix.
All right. Cheers.
So does anybody have questions about geography or climate or mountains versus coast or hard water versus soft water or anything else? You know, I'm happy to answer. And I'm always around, so.
Keiko-chan, dozo.
Hi. Hiko-san.
あれ
こんにちは。
こんにちは。
こんばんは。
こんばんは。First of all, thank you to JASM people for hosting this nice event. I enjoyed it a lot. As last year, you know, it's tougher this year because we have to be virtually on hanging out, but I enjoyed it a lot. And thank you, of course, to Chris for giving us nice lecture. I was very interested in like seimai buai.
Hi.
But I haven't seen seimai buai on any labels on sake. Is it very uncommon to see what seimai buai is, or
do we have to go to the website or go visit the brewery to see what seimai buai is for each sake?
Hi. Thank you. Arigato. This is a great question. So most sake, if you turn around and look at the back label, if it's in English, you'll probably see a reference to the milling grade, the seimai buai, okay? Except SakeStory, because Toshi and I made a decision that we really don't like numbers. We don't mind numbers for yeast, but sake meter value, seimai buai, it doesn't tell the whole story. We feel like we want you to approach sake from a less scientific point of view and from a more personal aesthetic, teaching your heart and your mind and expanding your soul while you taste sake. And forget about the numbers, because on any given day, a sake can taste like one thing, and then the next day it tastes like another thing. Depends on the temperature. It depends on so many things. So the rest of your life is consumed with numbers. How many private codes do you have? How many, I'm always getting locked out of all my apps because I can never remember my codes. And this is one thing that you can't get locked out of. So don't worry about the numbers on this one. Are they important? Yes. Am I exaggerating? A little bit. Can you go to the website and look up the milling grades? Absolutely. Go to our website and look them up. All the information is there. But I'm saying for you personally, I don't think it's going to reveal as much as you can learn hanging out, having dinner together, and letting the sake warm up from being chilled to being warm. Hi, so.
はい、ありがとうございます。
All right.
あやこさん、did you have any question?
ありがとうございます。
はい、あやこさん、どうぞ。
Hi, thank you. Before I ask a question, thank you so much for enlightening us with a new way of looking at sake. So, I really appreciate that. We do get to travel to Japan often for business, and at every place we happen to visit, it's kind of hit and miss, but we try to play safe and always buy ginjo, daiginjo, just because we don't always get to taste it before we buy it.
Hi.
And then bring one or two or maybe 2 each bottles every trip and then build our inventory. But my question is related to that and the storage. So when we bring the sake back from Japan, primarily ginjo, daiginjo, just because we don't get to taste it before we buy it, the place. We used to store those on top of the kitchen cabinet just because every label and bottles are so beautifully designed and different. So that was our display. And then one day our client from Japan came visit us at home, and they freaked out. Why do you keep all those bottles up there? That's not temperature safe. You should put them all in the fridge.
Right.
I keep them all in the fridge. So then I empty some of the wine cooler, a wine refrigerator, and put those sakes in the wine refrigerator. So what is the truth? Is it really, do you have to store them in a cooler or refrigerator, or is it okay to store them in the room temperature until you're ready to drink it?
Master Lark-san, I have an important question to ask you. How much sake do you drink?
Well, right now with the COVID, we can't visit Japan, so our inventory is very low. So when we do visit,
it was better now said. Okay. First of all, Melissa can fix that for you.
Thank you.
So, I would treat your sake like a fine bottle of wine. Dark, cool is fine. If you drink enough sake, it's fine. It's pasteurized. Most sakes are pasteurized twice. Some are only pasteurized once, but all sakes can last easily for 1 to 2 years.
Oh.
Don't cook them. Sunlight will destroy them very quickly. Kyokic acid is created in the presence of sunlight and amino acids. You do not want that to happen. Everything will taste like old cheese, not good cheese. So dark and chilled. If you want to put your sake into suspended animation, put it next to the eggs, okay? Put it in a bag, cover it so that you don't get any UV light. I mean, you can really get crazy with this, but you don't have to. So I always tell everybody that skinny little shelf where you keep the eggs with the fridge, just stock all your sake in there. And once that's empty, reload it. Everything else, keep it in the closet, keep it cool, keep it in the basement, keep it in the wine cellar.
Okay.
Many breweries build their sakes like a champagne cuvee. So I know a brewery that does 40% this year's sake, plus 40% last year's sake that has been aging in a huge walk-in cooler that's just above zero, and 20% sakes that are 4 and 8 and 10 years old. So that you get youthful young flavors and you get old grandpa flavors all at once. I love that sake, and it's not imported into the United States anymore. It's really a shame. But that concept exists in a lot of breweries. So you can age your sake, well, it will age and develop for like 2 years if you take care of it. If you just leave it out at room temperature, I think you'll be disappointed in 2 years. Okay, does that help?
Yes, thank you so much.
But the solution is just to drink more sake. And
so, and the
question is,
also, there was a recommendation that there was this apparently such thing called wine label removing kits. So if you can remove the label and then store it differently, then you can enjoy it that way.
Oh, to save the label, to make some art from it or something
or
like that?
Or just to record it, like a photo album, maybe.
Well, I have all of our labels digitized. So anybody who wants any of our labels, I will just forward you the whole document.
Oh, how interesting.
Okay. Like the labels that you saw on your little worksheets, those are examples. To actually get the labels off, well, my biggest problem is they come off all by themselves, because the problem is most of them are made from rice paper. And as soon as the rice paper hits water in a cooler when I'm at work, they just disintegrate and fall off. So the technique for getting a rice paper label off a sake bottle is beyond my skill set. I'm sorry to say.
So
I would just soak it in a cooler for 1 or 2 days and don't touch it. And wait till the glue just disintegrates and the label will float off intact. And then you can, lay it down and press it like a leaf and dry it that way. That's what I do. If you really want the original label.
I'm interested to know what the label removing kids.
I don't know anything about that.
So Ayako-san is going to test it, and then she's going to report back to us.
Okay. But you probably have some amazingly beautiful labels that are such great art, and things that never get to the U.S. So you should put that together and then share it with us next time we do this.
Yes.
So we actually didn't know this peeling technique off the bottle, we built the shelf of that empty bottle display. So when our client comes back again, they don't freak out about unopened bottles sitting on the kitchen cabinet.
So this name, they'll yell at you and then you go, no. That's good. Everyone, are you learning? These are really important details.
There's another question, which I never thought about this before. Is there mainly one area of Japan that makes sake? Sort of like how tequila is made only in, I can't read this place in Mexico. Champagne is made in Champagne.
Right.
Hi.
Well, the largest sake brewers in Japan are all in and around Osaka, Nara, okay? And that's where the original sake brewing was established by the Buddhist monks. There is amazing, huge volume of beautiful soft water that comes out of the mountain springs. Kyoto, Nara, Osaka. And I would say probably 70% of all sake is made there, volumetrically. The biggies are there. Hakushika and Gekikan, you know, they make millions of cases. But the really fun breweries are the little guys sprinkled all over the countryside, what was formerly known as jizake. They are now the repository of 1,000 years of brewing history that they never let go of. I mean, they're still working with wooden steaming, you know, tanks and a lot of old equipment. And when you go to visit them and you go, like, Oya-san, that's like really ancient. Why are you still using it? And he's like, well, because if I stop using it, it will change my sake. And everything I automate will change my sake. So I'm trapped. If I want to make sake like my grandparents and great-grandparents, and all of their portraits are up above the door, looking down at Oya-san, going, don't be the one. Don't be the one that stopped brewing the perfect sake that we started 300 years ago. So he's like caught in this like pressure situation because he knows how to automate, but he knows that he'll ruin their sake. So out in the countryside and up in the mountains and down on the coast and outside the big cities where the breweries were only built to make enough sake to take care of their village. And then they got a little bigger to take care of a few villages in the prefecture. And that's all they ever wanted to do. They never had aspirations to like be a big brand name in a big city. That's a modern conception. That's, frankly, I'm sorry, that's an invasion of the West. And that's all since World War II. So I forget what the question was, but that's my answer. Did that answer your question?
So it doesn't matter where it's made. Like, you know, champagne has to be made in Champagne. Otherwise, they are sparkling wine.
No. I mean, there is a new development where the Japanese are trying on French clothes, and we'll see how they fit. And I don't really think it will fit because the concept of terroir cannot exist in the sake world. Regionality exists because of brewing traditions, local rices, but water is different from well to well to well to spring to river to well. You can never establish terroir. You can ship the same kind of rice all over the country. So that's not an indicator of French terroir. So, but the Japanese brewers are always looking to try to help differentiate my sake from my neighbors. So the concept of terroir is very appealing. They just haven't figured out how to make it work yet. So the long and the short of it is just travel a lot, go to all the different prefectures, appreciate and enjoy every prefecture's style. And then within that prefecture's style, you'll find individual brewery expressions. Yeah.
Hi.
They all look like they're part of the same family, but everybody is unique. Does that make sense?
Hi. Other question. In the chart, all the chart has the word, I don't know how, it looks like a moose.
Moose. Moose.
M-O-U-S-S-E, moose in the chart. What does that mean?
Which chart are we talking about?
Your taste charts.
Maybe the word got cut off. I don't want to leave you all. What category is it in the grid for the tasting evaluation?
Mm-hmm. It's
moose. Oh, moose.
Under palate. Yeah.
Another French word.
Yeah, body, mousse. I don't know what it
It
means.
has to do with frizzante. It has to do with bubbles. It has to do with how thick is the head of foam, if there is one. So that's a term that usually applies just to champagne or beer. In beer, we call it the head. In champagne, we call it the mousse.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Okay. So if it's okay, I'm gonna make this a last question. The last question is, would Surdic considered as a regional promoter of sake, like the Nada region that Chris is talking about right now, or Niigata and Yamagata, different prefecture? Is that Melissa question? Is that Chris question?
Melissa question. Do I ask it one more time?
I lost it. Hold on. Would Surdics be considered as a regional promoter of sake?
We have sake from all over. We actually have sake from California that are sister breweries in Japan and California. And we have sake from all over Japan. And trying the different sakes from the different regions is very interesting to see the different styles and what they provide. But we provide a lot of different types.
And she is actually known, if I may add, nationally and now internationally, even if you don't know that, Melissa, because everywhere I go in Japan, I take photographs of that store and the sake set that Melissa has put together because it is unique in the United States. There are very, very few stores in the United States that carry such a well-vetted portfolio of sakes, other than a few Japanese sake-only stores in New York and San Francisco. So we're very, very lucky to have Melissa running the show. She is the queen of sake at Surdics. I'm not kidding.
Actually, the director of Jetro Chicago, he walked in randomly a while ago, and then he came back to our office and said, "Why do you have this? Why don't we have this in Chicago and you have this?" And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it's cool.
Kampai, Melissa.
Yes. To Melissa.
A lot more sake is coming to market thanks to Chris, and you know, we're getting new sakes, interesting sakes all the time. So you have to come check out the selection.
And just talking about Minnesota for a second, there are a bunch of really smart people that really love sake that are bringing it into the market. The biggest problem has been that there haven't been enough people like Melissa and her ability to connect with you. So now you know where to find it, and you know that it's ever changing. It's evolving all the time. And that gives me hope, and it gives the other people in Minnesota that handle fine sake an opportunity to find a market for these brewers. So, you know, we talked about the 3-tier system. This is a classic example. On this website, there are all 3 tiers together right now enjoying sake. Me as an importer, Melissa is your retailer, and you are all the people that are buying it and loving it. And this, you are why we do this, actually. You are exactly why we do this.
Yay. So thank you all again. Well, thank you, Chris.
Hey,
Melissa.
I got a question.
Everyone, hi. Thank you so much, everyone. Want to do it again?
Yo, Rio.
Yes.
Yo, I got a question.
Hi.
I'm sorry. I don't know how to work this shit. I never have. Okay, so I saw this label. It said Yo E Zu Ru, and I asked my wife what it meant, and she said it means drunk crane. And I looked to the back of the bottle where it says dancing crane.
Yes.
And I wondered if you
did we modify? Hey, who really can read the kanji well to know if that we may have changed the meaning of the kanji a little from drunken to dancing. Who can really read the character? Those of you who have, you're talking about this bottle.
Why? But why? And how do you think this happens?
Because Toshi Kojima is a very modest man, and he's very polite, and he would never want to say, drink this and get drunk. And besides, probably the federal government would not allow us to import a sake label that
says get your party on, right?
Right, no way. We'd never get it in the country. So
let's get this party started.
Jameson, is that correct? Does that character really say drunken, not dancing?
We usually use this kanji for drunk, right?
I love it. Okay.
I'm
sure that's why. I'm sure that Toshi didn't want to make trouble with the federal government.
I think we can go between dancing and drunken and go tipsy.
Tipsy.
Yeah. Right. Let's meet him in between. Let's go tipsy.
Yeah. Go tipsy, Crane.
Tipsy Crane.
I'm going to tell Toshi
dance it out.
We should change it to Tipsy Tokubetsu.
Oh, there you go. Thank you so much, dude.
Sake is called Drunken Whale and Drunken Snapper.
Right. Well, we will do this again. Rio, you're in charge.
Hi. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Please check us out in the future for art museum lecture and hula dance. Definitely hula dance is really fun, and it's a lot more work than I thought it is. So it's a really good workout. Again, thank you very much. This recording, we will share it with you so that you have this information. Thank you. Have a good night. Keep drinking.
Bye.